my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is politics and Kosovo, Serbia, I wouldn't say conflict, but disputes or ongoing conflict or a state of suspended conflict or however you want to see it. Basically what's happening is that Kosovo, which was part of Yugoslavia and actually part of Serbia, has declared himself autonomous and a separate country, and in 2008 created it as an official state or country, if you want to call it. But unfortunately, nobody really recognizes it as a country except some nations in the West. But neither do the UN do it, or any other, Russia or Serbia itself, and that's why there is a sort of a state of suspended conflict, if you want to call it. And recently, the Kosovo authorities wants to enforce the rule that all license plates and permits must now be issued in Kosovo, and that the Serbians who are currently residing in Kosovo don't agree with that, and neither does the Serbian authority to do that. And it seems to me that these two countries are prepared to go to war based on dispute about vehicle license plates and license permits and etc., which sounds on the surface as a totally ridiculous idea to do. But the conflict is much more deep-rooted than that, and one has to go a little bit deeper into why the dispute is happening, and etc., in the history of Kosovo and Serbia and etc. And that's why I'm trying to make this video today. Well, not trying, I am doing a video with the hope of clarifying certain issues, and hopefully that will be some information that you can use or that you can consider being informed. So let's start with, basically, one has to look at Kosovo per se. And like I always try to do, well, I don't want to go back too much, but unfortunately, into history, but unfortunately, in this case, one has to go. If you look at the history of Serbia and Kosovo, you have to go back a long time into history, and about on the even before the 14th century. Kosovo was the administrative and cultural center of the Serbian Empire, until it was overtaken by the Ottoman Empire in in the 14th century. And the Ottoman Empire ruled them for about 4 centuries, until there was the First Balkan War, which was in 1913, and which ended the Ottoman supremacy. But under Ottoman Empire, Kosovo was mostly Serbian, and it was actually divided into 3 parts, which 3 belonged to Serbia, and 1 was to Montenegro. And then after the First Balkan War, that means in 1913, Kosovo was divided among Serbians, Montenegro, and Albania at the Treaty of London in May 1930. The problem is that here that Kosovo was always inhabited by the Serbians. But during the Ottoman Empire, a lot of Serbians actually immigrated or fled the region and settled in other parts. And when they left the country, then the Albanians moved in, until such a stage that the Albanians became the majority in Kosovo. And the Serbians are now a minority. But one has to consider that the Serbians are considering Kosovo as a very important part of Serbia itself, because that is their history and their legacy. So you can argue that the Albanians were actually invaders of the country without firing a shot, if you want to call it like that. Now, unfortunately, 60% of the Albanians are Muslim, and the Serbians are mostly the Orthodox Church. And, well, that in itself can create certain problems. In any case, there were always some conflicts, and in the peace treaties of 1919, 1920, the state of Yugoslavia was created, and the kingdom contained about 12 million people, 400,000 of which were Albanians. But in contrast, about 60%, well, 64%, or even more, of these people were in Kosovo. And then I don't know why, I don't know why. Can I call Serbians as a race and Albanians as a race? So if we do that, then why are two races basically constant being in a warlike state and a conflict? I mean, it's like talking that the Germans are in constant war with the French, and the French are in constant war with the Netherlands, and Spain is in constant war to the British inhabitants because they don't like it. I don't know. It's the most stupid thing. And then we had the Bosnia-Herzegovina wars, and for religious purposes, or why? I mean, are we not civilized enough at this stage to recognize and respect other races? Because I don't have a different name for that, or cultures. So for me, this whole thing is a little bit disturbing, if you want to call it, because I don't see a reason why people should kill each other and why they can't live back in harmony. But I'm sort of digressing again. So in any case, after the Second World War, Kosovo became an autonomous region of Serbia within the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, under Marshal Tito's communist regime, so it became a communist country. And it was also with the constitution, the passing of the Yugoslavian constitution in 1974, Kosovo gained the status of a socialist autonomous province within Serbia. So as you can see, in spite of all the Albanian population, Kosovo is still part of Serbia. And there's no reason for it to actually split off. But unfortunately, Tito died in 1980, and that's when the intentions between the two cultures or civil races started up again. And the conflict intensified, and Albanian students organized protests seeking to make Kosovo a republic within Yugoslavia, and it created widespread violence, riots, where a lot of people were involved. And then in the 1980s, the provincial government in Kosovo began to discriminate against the Serbian population, and actually that escalated and into ethnic cleansing. And as you will later hear, ethnic cleansing is a big part of it, but according to history, the Kosovans and the Albanians actually started the ethnic cleansing. And this, again, caused many Serbians to migrate out of Kosovo. Despite this, communist authority in Belgrade ignored the Kosovo Serbs, and it caused more resentment among them. And then in the late 1980s, they got a new leader, and you should have heard of him before. That's Slobodan Milicevic. You know, I have difficulties in names. And he rose to power, and he was a Serbian nationalist, and by 1987 he had the full control over the Serbian government, and in 1989 Milosevic revoked the Kosovo autonomy and bring it and try to establish order again in Kosovo and making it part of Serbia. He also implemented a new constitution, which on the surface guaranteed a multi-party system and freedom of speech and basic human rights. But we know that Milosevic ignored most of the constitutional provisions. And, well, that in itself created a number of problems. And then in 1990, Milosevic passed legislation which ordered the firing of ethnic Albanian state employees in Kosovo and causing tens of thousands of ethnic Albanians to lose their jobs. Why he did that, I don't know. Maybe he was a racist again. Sometimes I don't understand why these people do things. I mean, we all want to live, we all want to survive, we all want to have a good life and families and kids and all this other stuff. So this type of fanaticism or ideology, I don't understand it. Unless it becomes you're on the other side and your rights are basically being abused, which the Albanians, I have to admit, were abused by Milosevic's policies. And in any case, so in the 1990s, the Albanians in Kosovo started engaged in peaceful and non-violent resistance. But unfortunately, in 1997, they created the Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA, and this group started a guerrilla war and a campaign of terror. Now, unfortunately, if you do that, then there's no mercy for you, and in my opinion, the state basically then has the right to take whatever actions were necessary to bring order and stability and law back to the country, whether it was Milosevic or any other leader. And this KLA also killed a lot of policemen and Serbians, and they did also commit atrocities. So they are not innocent people. And, well, Milosevic had to react. And that is what he did. And he set in the police and the military campaign against the KLA, which apparently included massive atrocities against the civilians. And thousands of ethnic Albanians were killed, and over 800,000 ethnic Albanians were forced from their homes. Now, this all sounds nice, and if that is what you usually get in the Western media. But also, unfortunately, I can't find all the articles about what the atrocities and what was fake news at the time. But, hey, what's the guy's name? In any case, it was later out found that these atrocities were, you know, it's a debatable point. You can, the inside information that about 2,500 Albanians were killed, and they are called civilians, and they are called as a massacre, but there are also a lot of other people that have information that these 2,500 people are mostly KLL members and terrorists, and their deaths were warranted or legal in that sense, because they were killed in action, or in certain operations and so on. But naturally, the whole matter is a little bit grey. And at the end of the day, if you look at the final result, you will see that there were some war crime tribunals or courts against Serbian leaders and Serbian military personnel, and where these guys have been found guilty. But when it came to the atrocities performed by the KLA and the Albanians, and those cases were usually dropped, and nobody was really found guilty. And when that happens, you have to think twice about the matter, because then something is not lekker. You know, you cannot, don't tell me only the one side creates atrocities and the other side doesn't do it. So I believe there's a little bit of truth in the 2,500 Albanians, and that they were not civilians and that they were military personnel. And basically that it was used as a pretense for the final involvement of NATO in the conflict. Well, in any case, in the response to the widespread violence, the international community, which basically NATO and the West, initiated mediation efforts, and this resulted in the Rambolit Accord, which called for Kosovo autonomy and allowed NATO troops to enter Kosovo in order to secure peace. Because Milosevic apparently didn't recognize the Rambolit Accord, the NATO started off with an aerial bombardment campaign on March the 24th in 1999 to halt the violence. And by the end of 1999, the total number of refugees and displaced persons totaled more than 50 million, 15 million. Now, I'm not totally sure how that's possible. That's a hell of a lot of people, 50 million. We don't even see this happening currently in Ukraine. And where did they have to go, and where did they get the money to sustain it? Oh, yes, I know they went to Albania and Moldova, etc., etc. But still, 50 million people is a lot of people. But in any case, NATO bombed Serbia for about 78 days. And apart from only not bombing only military installations or military targets of Serbia, they also destroyed a lot of infrastructure. And I still remember the one that they destroyed the chemical plant where the chemicals went into the river. I know about the bombing of the Chinese embassy, and also the was a TV or radio station where a lot of civilians were killed by the bombings. And those are all war crimes in any case. So the NATO and the Americans are not innocent in this field. So, and then I'm not going to go there. In any case, so basically when the NATO started to destroy Serbian infrastructure, then Milosevic had no other choice but to agree. And basically ineffectively not surrendered, but yeah, you can say that. And then the KRL was reinstated violence against the Serbs on their part again, ensuring, or no, not ensuring, causing Serbs to flee the country. You know, everybody's always fleeing the country, and how many Serbs are still left to flee at that stage? But no, yeah, that is what's happening. And in any case, on June 10th of 1999, the United Nations Security Council adopted the resolution 1244, and that formed the basis for the constitutional development in Kosovo. And basically, that is NATO then sent some troops in order to keep the peace. And that is how it went on for a while. Well, Kosovo was still part basically of Serbia, and but changes were occurring in Serbia and Kosovo itself. The KLA and other Albanians tend to command and to control over the local authorities, government, and they created sort of a constitution, and then a lot of Serbians were again submitted to violence and prosecution and, well, again, ethnic cleansing. Now, as you can see, it doesn't matter who was in control, the other group was always ethnically cleansed. But unfortunately, the numbers are not available. So up to that point, Kosovo had little government experience, governing experience. And during the, because of Milosevic eliminated most of the autonomy, so nobody had real much experience. And then during Milosevic's regime, the Democrat League of Kosovo had been the dominant political party. And after the war, another two parties evolved. Democratic Party of Kosovo and the smaller Alliance for the Future of Kosovo. And the PDK, that's the Democratic Party of Kosovo, then evolved from the Kosovo Liberation Army, and it considered out of ex-KLA members. And then about, like I said, in May in 2001, they created the constitutional framework for provisional self-government in the Kosovo, and etc. and etc. I'm not going to go into the details. But the first election was after the war took place in November 2001. And then, well, the government was established. Basically, in March 2004, violent demonstration occurred in Kosovo. And that was more or less the worst since the end of the conflict in 1999. And again, Serbian Kosovonians, if that's the correct word, were targeted in the violence, and which resulted in about 19 civilian deaths and over 900 persons injured. And again, a lot of Serbians displaced and moved from Kosovo. A lot of stuff can be said. There's a lot of other political actions that happened in between the years and so on, but in 2008, February, the Kosovo Assembly, the government, adopted the Declaration of Independence in full accordance with the recommendation of the UN Special Envoy, Marty Ahtisaari. And it pledged to be a democratic republic and accept all obligations under the Ahtisaari Plan, including the adoption of a new constitution within 120 days. And they compiled the constitution, and it came into effect by June in 2008. Now, as you can see, if you sum it up, Kosovo was part of Serbia. It was mostly populated by Albanians, but it doesn't mean by which population it was occupied. It was a heritage land of Serbia. There were a lot of Serbians actually living there, and they were, at the end of the day, the minority, and they were later on victimized as a minority. A lot of them fled, and basically Kosovo was occupied and annexed by Albanians, not Albania the country, but Albanians, for their own use. And the Kosovan Albanians always wanted to reintegrate to make it part of Albania, the country. So they wanted to belong to the group, but they basically annexed land that didn't belong to him, technically. Now, naturally, the Serbians cannot accept that because it's their heritage. So in this instance, I can support the Serbian claims. I do not agree with the Albanians, but if the Serbians gave them, respected the Albanians and protected them as a group of people within their country, then the Albanians didn't need to do all these things. But again, you will probably find that it's a few people that have this ideology that then try to enforce the ideology on the rest of the people. So again, whether they're oligarchs or whether they are the deep state or whether they are just simple activists with an ideology, these people always create problems. Normal people don't want to have conflict. They all want to live in peace. And I don't care what my neighbor is. If he's a nice person, I'll talk to him and be friends with him and have barbecues and all this other stuff. But there's always somebody that goes and fiddles it and interferes. And unfortunately, this has created this conflict and a standoff. But in 2008, Kosovo, on its own, declared independence without holding a referendum or referendum or asked the people. And that is totally different from the situation in Crimea or in the Donbas region or in Kherson and some region. Therefore, in terms of international law, as I understand it, Kosovo cannot be an independent country and cannot be recognized as such. and should be recognized as part of Serbia. And like I said, the world doesn't recognize it as per se, and only a couple of, not even the UN does that, and only a couple of Western countries do that. On the other hand, you have Crimea, which followed the international law, hold a referendum, and I have made previous videos where Sergei Lavrov talked about this whole matter and pointed to international law, and therefore Crimea had the right to secede from Ukraine, and they had the choice of becoming part of Russia. Whether that process was honest or so, well, pro-Western people will say no, pro-Russian people will say yes, but who the hell knows? Only the people are really involved in that. But, in my opinion, I believe Crimea, who was always part of Russia, that the referendums were done correctly, and it was fair and reasonable. And that also the recent referendums held in the Donbass. Whether the Donbass want to become part of Russia, that's something else, but at least they wanted to be not threatened by their own government, and that is a good enough reason for me to secede from a government, from your government. In any case, so now we have Kosovo. Now both of them actually want to be part of the EU. The EU recognized Kosovo because they want to get involved. And they are now pressurizing Serbia to recognize them and make their EU ascendancy, that's a correct word, to the EU of Serbia, dependent on Serbia recognizing Kosovo as an member state. Now that, in my opinion, is a totally unfair and unreasonable demand. But we have come to know that the EU is autocratic and not a democratic institute, and they don't shy away from pressuring and force people into their own decisions. And for that reason alone, I will never recommend any country to become part of EU. They are just being abused. They are just being used as cheap labor for the wealthy Western countries like Germany and France and Belgium and etc. and so on. Because the labor in the Balkan, not in the Balkan, but in the East Bloc countries are the cheapest, and they are being exploited. Make no mistake about that. And for some other reason, the Kosovo government has now decided to typically force the Serbians into certain laws on their country, which is in violation of the Serbian population. And the Serbians are now actually refusing to do that. And that's where all the story comes from and all the conflict comes from. And the issue is permits and vehicle licenses. The Kosovo authorities want now the Serbian, everybody in Kosovo, to register and get permits from the Kosovo authorities, and that all vehicles in Kosovo should show the Kosovo number plates. Well, I can see that it's sort of a reasonable request, but if you're not recognized by Serbia and you're still part of Serbia, then unfortunately that's a little bit of unfair demand, especially if you think about the Serbians, and especially if you think that that might lead to a conflict where people could be killed. And that is what I'm saying. Kosovo and Serbia prepared to go to war over vehicle license plates? Really? No, is that not one of the top points of idiocy or stupidity? In any case, well, if it was Serbian, then I would have mounted two number plates. Now we'll keep the Serbian plate, and just about it I will mount the Albanian plates, and then both of them are satisfied and I don't have to pay a fine. And I sort of boycotted, semi-boycotted the Kosovan authorities, but I was also true to my heritage, and I also recognize the Serbians control. So Maybe they should consider that as a solution to the conflict, to the problem. Yeah, wear both number plates, wear both permits. Yeah. Come on, it's not that difficult. In any case, it baffles me how these people argue. And especially it's still in the 21st century, if you want to call it. In the garden part of the Western world, as Borrell has said, well, it seems to be more like a jungle, or worse than a jungle, in that region. In any case, I cannot support the Kosovo and the Albanians. It's too bad, but they are basically, yes, their grandfathers and families grew up in Kosovo, but that still doesn't give them a right to join Albania. And the Serbians, I can understand, it is their heritage. But again, in our modern world, really, are you prepared to die for stupid items like that? You can still honor your culture, your heritage. But, yeah, it's for you to decide as a real. That's my story for today. Hope you liked it. Subscribe to the channel or don't. And until next time, cheers.